Hello, let's find out what happens in Chapter 9 of Mr. Penguin and the Lost Treasure. Chapter 9, Beware the Jungle, Dark and Deep. Mr. Penguin was the first on his feet. He dusted himself off, plonked his hat back on his head, and looked around, blinking. He couldn't believe his eyes. They were now in a vast open space, as high as a cathedral and as hot as a pizza oven. All around them were great green trees, grew from the ferny undergrowth. It was a thick, jungly forest, hung all about with ropes of tangled vines. Jewel-colored butterflies and fireflies with glowing bottoms fluttered and buzzed around their heads. Miss Bones scrabbled to her feet, followed by Montague and Colin. Everyone was covered from head to toe in a mixture of slimy mud, dusty cobwebs, and sand. "Where are we?" gasped Miss Bones, her eyes as big as dinner plates. Mr. Penguin hadn't a clue, so he consulted the book again. "According to the map," he said, "we should be in the museum basement, but this does not look like a basement to me. And the treasure is hidden down here?" asked Miss Bones eagerly. "I suppose it must be," said Mr. Penguin, rubbing his beak thoughtfully, "but where?" The answer came from Colin. He tapped Mr. Penguin on the knee and pointed to a nearby tree. Carved into the trunk, slightly mossy with age, was an arrow. It pointed downward. The treasure hunters gingerly made their way through the foliage toward it. When they reached the tree, they looked down. There was nothing to see other than sandy soil. Mr. Penguin took out his magnifying glass and spotted the corner of something wooden slightly sticking out of the earth. "What's this?" he cried. He started to dig with his flippers, and with the help of Montague's enormous hands, they soon uncovered a wooden box. Mr. Penguin tried to open the lid, but it was stuck fast. He nodded at Colin, who grinned, and then with another kung fu kapow, the lid went flying. Inside was a hand-drawn map and a very old-looking envelope sealed with red wax and stamped with 2 crossed bones. "The family crest," whispered Miss Bones. Mr. Penguin opened the envelope and read the message inside. "Beware the jungle, dark and deep, for in the shadows creatures creep, with jaws that gnash and teeth that bite. Oh yes, my chums, they're quite a sight. So follow this map, it leads to riches, but unwise is he who from the path switches. Sir Randolph Bones, founder of the museum and professional treasure hunter." Mr. Penguin opened the map up carefully, and everyone gathered around to look. A red dotted line wove its way across the page, twisting and turning around trees and boulders. It went over what looked like several roped bridges hanging above deep valleys and a river with a waterfall. It ended at another X. "All this was hiding under the museum all along?" asked Mr. Penguin, "and you didn't know anything about it?" "Nothing at all," said Miss Bones, and from the look on her face, Mr. Penguin could tell she was as bamboozled as the rest of them. Mr. Penguin straightened his hat and took a step forward. The quicker they found this treasure, the quicker he would be able to eat his fish finger sandwich. He followed the red line on the map, which led to an overgrown path between 2 enormous palm trees. Everyone fell in behind him, and the troop of treasure hunters began making their way at last to the treasure. It was a difficult trek. There was a lot of clambering over fallen tree trunks and fighting through tangled foliage that slapped against their faces. Mr. Penguin found it quite tricky to remain the right way up and not trip over the many sudden bumps and lumps underfoot. Soon Colin took the lead, on account of his kung fu kicking legs being rather handy at breaking through branches. They were just stopping for a breather in a small clearing when Colin suddenly stopped. "Listen," he wrote on his pad. Then on the next page, "Listen to that." Everyone stopped and strained their ears. The strange noise from earlier had returned, but this time there was no doubt whatsoever about what it was. Footsteps. And they weren't terribly far away. "Sounds like someone is following us," whispered Mr. Penguin, fussing nervously with his bow tie. Miss Bones gasped and clasped a hand to her bosom. Her eyes darted toward Montague, and they both went pale. "I think I know who it is," she hissed, grasping on her brother with her plump, trembling hands. "Jewel thieves." Join me next time to find out what happens in Chapter 10.